Hey everybody, this is Dave Dugdale, learningdslrvideo.com. This is a quick review of the Atomos Shogun. If you have the Sony a7S like I do, you can now shoot in 4K. And if you have the GH4, which already shoots in 4K, you can now shoot in 422 10-bit. So first up, let me tell you all the different things that I really like about this unit. The first thing are all the tools, basically. The vector scope, or being able to zoom in on the vector scope and see where that little dot is and put it right in the center to have a very neutral image for white balance, is just utterly fantastic. I absolutely love the 2x1 focus zoom in feature, and you can scroll around the screen, find where you want to focus on, and just lock in on the focus. It's just utterly fantastic, especially in a 4K recording where you can get really into the image. I love having real-time RGB parades really big right on the screen. It's a no-brainer setting up your white balance. Just a fantastic tool. And another thing I really enjoy having is the false color. False color is a fantastic tool for adjusting exposure. Like for instance, I'm standing in front of a green screen and I was able to use false color to get my green screen lit very evenly. All right, next up I want to talk about a few quirky items that you might encounter if you have the a7S or the Panasonic GH4. The first item is with the Sony a7S. If you enjoy shooting an S-Log2, you might be a little bit disappointed because the Atomos Shogun creates a more contrasty image than what happens inside the camera. I have a feeling this is not the Shogun's fault, but more of what's going on with the output of the HDMI on the a7S. All right, next up, I'm not too sure if this is a benefit or not, but after about 10-15 seconds, my skin would become more smooth. I'd have this skin smoothing effect, something that you would find in Photoshop where you'd take out all the blemishes. So I go from blemishes to not having blemishes. It's really odd. Again, I don't know who is at fault here, but I'm gonna guess this might be more of a Sony a7S issue rather than Atomos Shogun, but I could be totally wrong on that. Now, if you're shooting with the GH4 and the Atomos Shogun, you might want to take a careful look at your luminance ranges. For instance, do you want to use 0 to 255, or perhaps definitely look at 16 to 255, because there's a definite difference of what's happening coming out of the HDMI. For my mostly run and gun style, the Atomos Shogun doesn't make sense for me mounting it on top of the camera or attaching it in some sort of rig. However, when I do a lot of interviews, it's a fantastic tool in terms of getting exposure right, the white balance, getting peeping, zooming in, seeing the image in 4K. The screen is pretty good. I'd say outside it's not super great because you're going to get a lot of glare off the screen, but I will tell you it's a lot better. You get a lot more information than looking at the small display that's on the back of the camera. So I'm relatively new to the ProRes file format that comes off the Atomos Shogun. So I wanted to run some tests on my beastly computer with 8 cores. So basically the HQ, the 422, and the LT in a 4K format coming off the GH4 in 422, 8-bit or 10-bit used about 28% of my CPU over average about 20 seconds. However, the GH4 internal 4K at 420, 8-bit used about 24%, so a little bit less. So I was kind of confused on that. I always thought that the ProRes was a lot easier on your computer than the internal codecs coming off of the camera. Also, the GH4 4K file sizes are about 3 times smaller than the Shogun LT 4K file sizes. The other thing I couldn't really understand about ProRes, which I've heard is always a fantastic tool in terms of editing, I was getting some drop frames on my beastly computer, whereas the other one, I really wasn't getting any drop frames. So I'm a little bit confused at all the people that have said ProRes is such a great codec to edit with when I'm dropping frames with it and it's using more CPU power. Many people before me have tested their internal codec of their camera to an Atomos product. And basically the general outcome is there's really not that much difference between the ProRes files that are created and their modern camera. But I'll show you some tests and you'll probably comment how I did it wrong and we can keep this trend going. I couldn't see a lot of difference between the GH4 using green screen at 422 versus 420. I tried looking at all the different channels in Photoshop to see which one had more detail, but I just couldn't see any difference. I tried taking my wife's dress, which is very sheer, and to see which one would key better through the green screen, and they pretty much all looked identical. Some people have told me that you have to pull a really hard secondary. So I'll take a color and totally change it to a different color and see how it does around the edges and see what kind of chattering is going on after you pull your secondary. Well, I've done that with this WD can, and as you can see, I've changed the color yellow to something totally different. And if you zoom way in, you can see that the chatter and what's going around on the edges of this imperfect key, basically, of the secondary, you can see they pretty much look identical. If you're the owner of a Panasonic GH4, do you need an Atomos Shogun since the Panasonic already shoots in 4K? I would say no, unless you really needed all the tools and the wonderful screen. I would like to have it, but paying $2,000 for that is a lot of money when you could find other solutions a lot cheaper that don't have a built-in recording capability. Now, if you're a Sony a7S owner and you've never had 4K, then the Atomos Shogun looks to be pretty good. However, I will tell you, spending $2,000 on this just to get 4K, you might think twice about it, because come April of this year, who knows, Sony might release the Sony a7S II, and that might have a 5-axis image stabilization, a touchscreen, and who knows, it might actually shoot in 4K. So will I buy the Atomos Shogun, me being the owner of a GH4 and an A7S? I'm gonna say no, because with GH4, I can get 4K recordings, and with A7S, I get wonderful close-ups like in interview shots. So I really don't need it myself personally, but I would love to have the screen, the large screen. I'd love to have all the great tools that it comes with. I'm gonna probably wait a year. Who knows, maybe that $2,000 price tag might drop to $1,600 and make it a little bit more tempting for me. So that's pretty much it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.